Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Today we're finishing up the last chapter, chapter 9 of book 2. Um, and then after we finish this, in the next video we'll go to book 3, which book 3 and 4 will be the elaboration of the so-called moral virtues, or the ethical moral virtue, because the word is ethic in Greek, and which are the questions of character. Now, I'm going to say something here that Aristotle's ethics is as much a psychology as a morality. This is the problem. I think this is a phenomenology of human action. This is what this is: a phenomenology or a psychology of human action. It's less. We don't get into the intent. Maybe we could actually say a deeper understanding of Aristotle's psychology we found in his De Anima, right, on the soul, right, on the anima. In fact, the soul, psyche, the word psyche, is the um, the psyche is the mind, or that's where you get the word psyche or psychology, right? So it is the understanding of the soul, right? The anima, animation of the way they're doing it. Not looking at it, we're looking at the ethics in that sense. Okay, yeah, okay, I know. Why don't you go, Mr. Millerman and I really like Millerman. But I think he's more interested in no, I'm saying I'm not criticizing him. I think ultimately, maybe, I don't know. He likes to go into the deep end of philosophy, where I'm, for this purpose, am more trying to get to the shallow end, the beginning points of this to people. I'm more political in the sense. I think I'm concerned about the political things. And that's why ethics is interesting for us, because the ethics of Aristotle is important to understand the behavior of actors, right? We'll discover at the end of the book, when he deals at the last end of the very end of the politics, he will introduce the question of legislation and the question of the tie to the politics. Also, when we get to the book 6 about prudence, we see the connection of prudence and political judgment. So, this is why, and also in the discussion of friendship, we'll get a discussion of political things. So, my turn to the ethics is not a kind of abandonment of politics, but rather I think it's kind of giving us the prelude by which Aristotle's politics rests on. And also, I thought it would be good to do. So, we're going to finish up today, book 2, on chapter 9, right? So, let's go on the question of moral virtue. Now, he goes, the moral virtue, or the ethike, arete, is a mean. Then and how it is such. And then and how it is such. So the virtue is this, and then how it is such. That it is a mean between two vices, and one relating to excess, the other deficiency. And that it is such an account, and it is such on account of its being skilled at aiming at the middle term in matters of passion and action, has been stated adequately. He's basically saying, okay, I have adequately addressed the issue of how moral virtue is a middle term and how it aims. Now, this is why we have to go look to Machiavelli, go back, remember Machiavelli and his Prince, when critically in chapter, what is it? We get to things of praise and blame, right? In chapter, all the way back in chapter 15, right? Classic 15, Prince, of those things which we get aim and blame. In other words, the metaphor of hitting the target, the archer, right? The prudent archer, right? The prudent archer, that he uses the metaphor. And this is the same thing. And Aristotle is suggesting that it's an aim. Virtue is like a question of archery, in that sense, that the mean is that target. It is not just an average, it is that middle point that is the bullseye. It's extreme in that regard. So therefore, he's saying that he was summed up on this concern of these things, and it's been adequately addressed at this. Hence, it is in fact a test to be serious, budios. For in each case, it is a test to grasp what resides in the middle. So therefore, it's something serious, something we have to take our we should be serious, spodion, about or serious about, because it takes a grasp of what resides, what is in the middle, what is the middle term in that sense, what is the mean in that sense. For example, to grasp the middle of a circle belongs not to anyone, but to a knower. So again, this is the question. In other words, what is the middle of a circle? Well, you have to know something about the circle, right? He's saying you have to have a knower of where the middle is. What is the middle in that sense? So it's a question of knowledge in terms of the middle of a circle is a question of knowledge. And so, two, to become angry belongs to everyone. And it is an easy thing, as is also giving and spending money. But to whom one ought to do so? How much, when, and for the sake of what, and how? These no longer belong to everyone, nor they're easy. Okay, I was about to sneeze. That's why I stopped here for a second. Now, what he's saying that in many ways, the question is knowledge, right? Before, the idea of grasping the circle, he uses the metaphor of a circle, of being able to find the middle of a circle. This is a question of knowledge, of knowing, okay? But the question of these issues are, saying angry and spending money and, desiring. This is, everyone does this. This is not, it's not a question of specialty of knowing. It's something that's common, and that knowing is not. In other words, the knowing of what this is going to be limited to ones who know. It's not something that it's something that's in the essence of many. But here it is. The problem here is knowing what, knowing the problem of. In other words, it's not the question of being angry or and spending money. This belongs to everyone, but but to whom one ought to do so, how much, when, for the sake of what, and how. These questions about being angry or spending money or any activity is something that it's not everyone going to know. It's going to be difficult, more difficult. It's going to be, these no longer belong to everyone, nor are they easy. In that sense, these things are easy. They're not easy. Being able to know what is right, or that question. It is a kind of knowing, but it's a knowing not in the same sense. It's not the same kind of knowing as knowing the center of a circle. So in other words, this is the difference between theoria. I think would be Aristotle later in book 6 and maybe even earlier. This is the difference between something of intellection versus action, praxis, right? This intellection is theoria, contemplation, something of contemplation, or theoria in the Greek, or an action, praxis. This is about the kind of knowing that is kind of in the realm. It's a knowing of action, okay, versus a knowing of concepts, ideas, and things. The circle, knowing the center of a circle, is something that is a pure. It's knowing in this intellectual sense, in this reflection sense of contemplation. It's something that is or is not. It has exactitude. Whereas these things we're talking about, there's not only there lacks in exactitude, but it's also going to be more difficult, as he says, right? Hence, he who aims at the middle term must first depart from what is more contrary to it, just as Calypso too advises. From the smoke and swell, keep the ship, right? This is that line. The text from Homer's Odyssey that comes down to us. These words are spoken by Odysseus' men as a result of Circe's advice at Odyssey 12, lines 2 19, right? According to Burnet, some inferior manuscripts have Circe rather than Calypso, which is more nearly right, right? And this is it. Not Calypso, but Circe, right? This is more right. The question is which manuscript is correct here. Some manuscripts, Burnet argues that it's not Calypso, but it's Circe. Some manuscripts will say Kirky, not Calypso, right? So therefore, and which is more nearly right in that sense, right? But again, from the smoke and the swell, keep the ship, the middle course, right? This is that idea. In other words, it's to aim at middle terms apart from what is contrary to it, right? You have to keep away from the extreme, the opposite, the contrary, the extremes, right? For of the extremes, the one is more in error and the other less, right? So that's right. There's that problem. One is more in error, and what is that? Since it is difficult to hit on the middle term with extreme precision, we must in accord with a second sailing, okay, as they say, grasp the least of the bad things. And this will occur most of all in the way we're speaking of. So wait a minute. Notice the term here. Now I'm going to stop here. The term, the second sailing, this is a very interesting one. A preferable expression is equivalent to the next best thing, right? The literal meaning here is the second sailing. Now, the second sailing is a very big concept in Socratic philosophy. It refers to Socrates turning away from the things in the sky, the natural philosophy, to the human things, right? That's Socrates' second sailing. The turn from the natural sciences to the study of opinion and the study of the human, right? But here, I think he's saying the next best thing. For Socrates' example, uses the expression of his turn away from natural philosophy and his predecessors of that of the examination of speeches, right? See Phaedo, 99, line 99, C9, right? And the context of that, right? That's the famous line of Phaedo, right? It's his second sailing, second turn away from natural philosophy to this. But here, some people translate it roughly equivalent to the next best thing. And I think this is the problem. That, okay, it's very difficult. Here Aristotle is saying that given these two things are opposed, the extremes are opposed to each other, and that sometimes one extreme is closer to the middle point than the other. And therefore, it's hard to get precise to hit the middle term. Therefore, maybe get a grasp of the least bad thing. And this is the second best, the next best thing. This is the next best. In other words, the best would be hitting the right middle term, knowing what is the right thing to do. But most people aren't going to. So therefore, he's arguing here for the suboptimal choice, the least bad choice. No, which one is worse? Which one is worse? Which one is less good? And avoid the worse and choose the one that inclines you to the right. Doesn't necessarily bring you to the light, but it's less worse, right? It's not good, but it's not correct, but it's less bad than the other one. That's in a sense, right? And as he says, the second sailing, as they say, grasp the least of the bad things. And this will occur most of all in the way we're speaking of, that in terms of these extremes, and the way that the extremes are opposed to each other, and the middle term is and sometimes the middle term is closer to one extreme than the other, right? And in fact, it's more, in other words, in that sense, there is a similarity, as he said earlier, right? So let's turn to the second paragraph. But one must examine what we ourselves readily inclined. We must examine what we ourselves readily incline towards. For some of us naturally incline to some things, and others to other things. So the first question is, what do we naturally incline ourselves to? What is our natural inclination? We need to know what is our natural inclination. What are we inclined to regarding these questions of fear, pleasure, honor, these emotions, these passions. Which one are we inclined? And the passions, and that's, I think maybe this is tied to the question of capacity, right? The one that we are inclined towards, right? This is the question of capacity, what we are inclined towards, or not capable of, or kind of leaning against, right? And then there versus the characteristic, which is by which how it manifests itself in action, right? He's saying that we have to look at to ourselves and what passions are we more inclined towards and ones that we're disinclined towards, right? This object of our inclination will be recognized from the pleasure and the pain that occurs in our case, right? So therefore, this it's going to be recognizable. The pleasure and pain, where things that we're inclined to will give us more pleasure, and the things that we're not inclined to will give us more pain, right? Um, and we must drag ourselves away from it towards its contrary. So therefore, this is why virtue will at first be painful. Why? This is why this question of doing the right thing sometimes will be initially painful to us. Until this leads us to the question of habit. Right? This is why we habituate ourselves to virtue, our actions and things. Habituate by once we become habituated, the pain will be less and less and less. Right? Because it's only painful at the beginning when if we have not don't know this, we're inclined to one thing, but the question is the inclination good for us or not? Is the inclination is good for us or not? Does it lead us to the correct thing? If it does, then what we need to moderate ourselves is teach moderation. Therefore, again, restrain us to that. But if we are inclined to the wrong thing, we have to push ourselves towards both moderating and pushing us towards is going to involve initially some pain, unpleasure, because we're fighting again. The thing that we incline to gives us pleasure, and the things that we're not inclined to, or that we don't want to incline ourselves to, or we move away from what is pleasure. But we understand this is pain, right? We must drag ourselves away from it towards its contrary. For by leading ourselves far from error, we arrive at the middle term, which is in fact what those who straighten warped lumber do. In other words, the warped lumber is like this, and therefore we do you move it against it so that you hope what hope you it goes like this, right? Warped lumber. The example of metaphor he gives, you straighten warp. There's a bend, right? So how do you do it? You just move it like this. No, you have to go even further. You move it so that so what happened that when it returns like this, it goes over here rather than. In other words, this is how you do this. So you move it towards the direction. Sometimes you might have to go beyond it so that when in other words, the example here is your natural your position is here. You're inclined to the pleasure here, right? And therefore, what you do is you move it further, maybe even go further past the mean place, because what's going to happen is you're going to you go back, and maybe you'll only go back as far as the mean, and therefore in other words, that's how you do the metaphor of the warped wood in that sense, right? But in everything, one must be especially on guard against the pleasant and pleasure, for we do not judge it impartially. So if we have to always be on guard, on guard against the pleasant and the pleasure, because we don't judge it impartially, because it's the thing we like. We don't we want to avoid pain. We seek pleasure, right? That is the animal in that sense. We don't judge it impartially in this sense. From the town elders, from what the town elders felt towards Helen, then is what we ought to feel towards pleasure. And in all cases, we ought to utter their remark. For by thus dismissing pleasure, we will err less. Now, This is from the Iliad. He quotes here the Iliad, right? This is Iliad, book 3, 15, 154 to 160. And when they saw Helen moving along the city walls, softly they uttered winged words to one another. Again, no indignation, no nemesis, right? Nemesis, no at the Trojan, no nemesis at the Trojans, and the well-grieved Achaeans, who, for the sake of this woman, have long suffered pains. Terribly does she resemble in our eyes the immortal goddess, but even as she is, but even such as she is, let her go home in the ships and not remain. For us and our children, a calamity hereafter. In other words, let's remember this is the story. But Helen is captured by Paris, steals her, brings her to a thing, and because of this, because of the obligation that the stole husband and his friends, the other kings, will swear to bring her back, and therefore they go to war. Right, the city will suffer. So therefore, no, it's better that yeah, she's beautiful. Yeah, she's beautiful, but she's not worth it. Because if we, yes, she resembles the goddess, the immortal goddess, right? Terribly, she does resemble in our eyes the goddess. But even, but even such as she is, it's better that you go home, right? That's the metaphor that Aristotle is addressing here in this line, this sentence. That the elders felt towards her that she's beautiful, but she's not worth the pain, right? She's going to cause us problems. And even though her presence is pleasurable, her sight of her is a pleasurable thing. Um, the cost of enjoying such pleasure uh, will be too hard for us to bear. It will destroy us. It's better that she leaves us. The pain, now she's leaving us will bring us pain, but it's better that she leaves us because if she doesn't, eventually we will get more pain, right? That's the idea of the line and the poetry. So thus, we feel pleasure, and in cases we ought to remark that line, right? By doing these things, then, to speak in simile fashion, we will most able hit on the middle term, he says, right? Once we understand, okay, this is, we avoid the worst. In other words, the elders are saying, listen, okay, like the warped wood gets warped back, gets straightened by pushing it even further than the other opposite to where it was warped. Hoping that when it goes, because what will happen is we'll spring back, and we hope that you train it so when it springs back, it'll be no longer warped, right? That's how you do that in that sense. Well, the same thing here is that since we are inclined to pleasure and wish to avoid pain, the question then becomes what's worse here? Okay, is the pleasure the cost of? Okay, we start. Helen is rightfully there, and the pain of the Archaeans, the pleasure we're getting, versus the pleasure that we get, right, versus the pain the Archaeans get by not having her. The question is, how much will that cost our city? What's happening is, well, they're going to come here and take her, and is the pleasure we get of her being here better, worth the cost that will happen because of her being here? Of that, they will make war on our city, right? To this question, the question is, what's worse, the pain of losing her, or the pain of having our city waged war on? It's better that she go. That's the elders, because again, this is the two situation. This is how do we get to the right action by looking at the opposite, the pleasure and the pain, and therefore we will accept some pain of her leaving because what happens is it avoids more pain later, right? Again, that's what how I would understand that passage. But perhaps this is hard, and especially so in particular cases. For it is not easy to define how, with whom, at at what sort of things and for how long a time one ought to be angry. So therefore, in other words, it's very difficult. In other words, this is going to be hard, right? Especially in particular cases, because what? It's not easy to find how we should be angry, with whom we should be angry, at what sort of things we should be angry for, and how long we should be angry. Sometimes we praise those who are deficient and assert that they are gentle. Sometimes those who are harsh, calling them manly. In other words, example, sometimes we praise those who are deficient and assert that they're gentle, and sometimes we praise those who are harsh, calling them manly. But who deviates, he who deviates a little from what is done well is not blamed, whether he does so in the direction of what is more than the mean, or in that what is less than it. In other words, those who deviate a little from what is done well, they're not blamed. They try. If they seek to do better, they deviate. Either they go too much or they go too thin from the mean. They're still not perfect, but we're not going to blame them in that sense, right? Why? Um, um, Whether there's some direction that what is more than the mean or what is less than it. But he who deviates more than is blamed. For he does not go unnoticed. In other words, if you deviate beyond the mean, well beyond the mean. In other words, for he who deviates more than that, just a little. We can, we understand if you're trying this and you fall short or you fall like this, but you're close, you're not going to be blamed. You're not perfect, but it's better than the excesses, right? But if you don't do that and you go to the excesses, you are blamed because this does not go unnoticed, right? The one who deviates more than that is because it does not go unnoticed. Because the one who goes close is not perfect, but it has the appear. It looks better. There's an improvement. Or if you go beyond that, you made yourself worse, right? Yet, at what point and to what extent is he blameworthy is not easy to define by means of an argument. For neither is there anything else that is subject to perception. In other words, for neither is there anything else that is subject to perception, since things reside in the particular involved. The relevant discussion too resides in the perceptions of the particular. Now he's saying, what is he saying here? It's very difficult to the extent the brainworthiness here, because it's a question of perception. Praise and blame will be always a question of perception, and unless there's the way we perceive something that is clearly deficient or excessive is that we see it excessive, and it's going to be, again, this is always framed in the particular involved, right? Such things reside in the particulars involved. Thus the relevant discussion too on this, we're talking about this, will always be in the resident prescription. That's why we're gonna need more discussion of this, right? And we end the chapter and the book 2 on this. This much then is clear. The middle characteristic in all cases is praiseworthy, but one ought to incline sometimes towards the excess, sometimes towards the deficiency. For in this way, we will most easily hit on the middle term and what is well done. Well done, done well. What is well done or done well. um, Again, this is the idea that we should always, the praiseworthy is always that middle term. But sometimes we should incline towards an excess and sometimes towards a deficiency. Why? Because this allows us to hit. In other words, therefore, this argument here is showing us the complexity of virtue in this regard. That it's not simply just hitting the middle term. It's this. The problem is that we have these two things. We have this emotion, we have the excess and the deficiency, and the middle term is towards this. And this is this. We move from one to the other, and that the idea of hitting the middle is moving from either this way or this way, right? And therefore, okay, we have to move where we are, the place where we have to move towards the opposite direction, right? And therefore, and we have to also remember that the thing that we're naturally remember, this chapter begins with the question of what are we naturally inclined towards. Well, the things that we are by nature inclined towards are going to be the thing that is more pleasurable to us, that we're used to, and therefore more pleasurable. Therefore, to move us away from this, we will not, we will get less pleasure, and hence this is maybe even more pain, right? So therefore, we have to learn how to adjust to this. Again, it is here that we see the connection of why the earlier discussion of in the beginning of this book on habit, discussion of habit, and the role that habit has here, and the connection of habit and choice, right? And the concern here, and the role habit will play in shaping or educating virtues in that sense. And this is why we're going to get a thing here. So it is, therefore, this is why this idea we hit, it's not because in this way we will most easily hit on the middle term and what is done well. Okay, this is where we stop. We're going to stop here. We finish up book 2 here. Next time we start book 3, chapter 1. If you have any comments or questions or issues or things you want clarification, please put them in the notes and in the comments, and I will see them and I'll address them. Please put some questions, comments, issues that you have about this, and again I respond to them. If you've liked it, please hit the like button. Hit the thumbs up. Why? Okay, it helps the channel. It helps the channel. It grows attention. If you liked it, encourage, share it on social media, share it far and wide. This also helps things. And bring it to your friends. Share it with your friends and people you think will be interested in this. If you've not subscribed, subscribe. If you know someone, again, the reason of subscription is that you get notifications of future videos. If you know your friends and students or colleagues or people interested in these things, someone you know who's maybe someone who's your adult, maybe your child or a younger person or an older person that you know that would be interested in this topic and these things, please recommend the channel to them and encourage them to subscribe. I'd like to grow the channel a little bit. Last but not least, not last but not, but if you didn't like what the video said, you could always hit thumbs down, but say why in the comments. Give us a reason, and this way we can learn. If I did something wrong, or if you didn't like something, but explain what exactly and how we can improve it. Last, and continuation, if you want to follow me on social media, my links are below, the social media links below to where I'm on social media. If you want to find more about me as a scholar and look at my research and things like this, below the social media are my academic social media, which directs you towards the various places where you can find about my background and also about my research. If you want to help me to do what I do, aside by going to my academic social media and finding my university email address and sending me an Amazon card, you can do so. If you want to financially help me do what I do, you can do so through the links below, Patreon or Subscribestar. Another thing you can do is you can, if you want to help, you can buy one of my books listed below. If not for yourself, then if you've not already bought one for yourself, you can buy it for a friend or someone you know who might be interested in this. The book that would be the most, if you're anyone studying Aristotle's politics, the notebook for Aristotle politics with Lulu is best because if you buy it through Lulu directly, I get a bigger share. I get the I get the bookstore share in that sense. Okay, there's a little self-interest in there. Okay, that's it. Well, I'll see you again. I hope you have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.